And we have with us MK Orna Barbivai, number 2 on Yesh Atid party. Thank you for joining us. MK Orna Barbivai, is Yesh Atid a party that excludes Haredim? That's what people want to think about Yesh Atid. I think the fact that Yesh Atid over the years, for 9 years now, talks about the need to talk to all of the citizens of Israel and of having equal law for everyone, of having equality that is not selective. This does not come from a place of exclusion. On the contrary, it comes from the place of a narrative that talks about an egalitarian Israeli society. And if we're talking about Israeli society, we saw in the Corona crisis situations where the law is applied differently in different places. And I think that a government party needs to look at all the parts of the population. Do you view yourselves as being the ruling party? Yes, of course we do. With a population of 12% Haredim and 19% Arabs, I don't think we can afford to exclude anyone. Why do people say that about Yesh Atid? We have a lot of criticism of Haredi politics because over the years we've seen that the political extortion has painted an entire sector in a certain color, including their representatives in the public. I want to talk about the subject though, because if the subject itself is core studies, and because of that somebody will say certain things about us in regard to the Haredim, what are core studies? English and mathematics, in order to move the economy forward so that most people who are capable of work will be able to work. There's a report that talks about the fact that within 30 years, the majority or half of the children in Israel will be Haredim. Today, 50% of first grade children are either Arabs or Haredim. You can't rely on things to work things out for themselves. You have to, in order to continue Israel's achievements since its establishment, you have to create a contract that talks about that everyone is equal before the law, and also for opportunities. If you're talking about the political leadership of the Haredim, do you think the next coalition should not include the Haredi parties? When I look at this political musical chairs, which has become everything, but that's how the story works. When you get up in the morning, everyone declares themselves prime minister, but I won't sit with this one, or I won't sit with that one. I think here in Yesh Atid, we're saying, look, we're not talking about ourselves, we're talking about the public that has undergone such a terribly difficult year in terms of jobs and health, almost 5,800 people who died. It's a terrible situation. But now to talk about who you're going to sit with and who you're not going to sit with, that's superfluous now. But in order to implement your agenda and to deal with the Haredi public, do you think that in the next coalition, it might be a good idea for these parties to be in the opposition? I think it's the public that should decide what the next government should look like. And I suggest that the public go to the ballot box and think about what kind of government it wants to see. We talked about having a Jewish and political, a Jewish and democratic state, and we're seeing that the democratic liberal values are being pushed aside. And I want everyone in Israel to be able to live according to their beliefs and not feel that there is a group that is trampling what they believe in. For me, to trample is to say every day that we are going to cancel laws, or to tell people that they can't marry in a civil marriage in Israel. And all of these are things that are part of our platform. These are things that we believe in. But what do you mean blue and white? Blue and white has blue and white violated every agreement, breached every agreement that it made. We have a platform, and unfortunately they withdrew from everything they said that they would do. I think in this reality, every citizen should look at the party. For 9 years, Yesh Atid has been in Israeli population and has 16 Knesset members, an excellent group of parliamentarians led by Lapid, and give them the tools to have an agenda that is both Jewish and democratic. The ADL carried out a survey in advance of this conference, 90% of the respondents said that the political leadership is the factor that contributes most to division in Israel after the media, traditional and new media, with 84%, followed by the rabbinical establishment with 74%. What's your opinion? 90% believe that the politicians are Republican. I didn't read that study, but I think it is reflective of the situation because we've seen what's happened in the past few years. I think that the leading politicians have become the greatest inciters because it's a kind of an exercise. If they fight amongst themselves, maybe they won't pay attention to other things. You're saying that this is a deliberate discourse? Absolutely. This is deliberate from the prime minister down to incite one public against another. If you don't understand that your job as a leader is to create connections and to create an agenda for everyone, we're all here to stay, the Haredim and the Arabs and those who live other lifestyles. Ultimately, we all want to have a state here that will be able to exist and that the values will enable everyone to live in accordance with their beliefs. You can't have part of the public feel, and we go around now and we're more by Zoom than in person. Now we're going out more within all the restrictions, and we're calling on people to get vaccinated. We need to do whatever we can to eliminate this terrible disease. But you see the public and you understand that there are people who feel that their basic values, the ones that they have fought for, are no longer represented in the Israeli public. And there are those who do this deliberately. Yes, of course. So you support the decision on the part of the High Court of Justice to recognize recform and conservative conversion. What do you say about the Haredi parties that say that they will change the law against that? When I was in the IDF for over 33 years, and I saw the encounters in the army of the 18-year-olds who came from many different sectors and different places all over the country. I don't like to call it a melting pot because I don't think you need to melt anyone, but I did see how when there is a shared organizing idea and a shared goal, the barriers fall because the stigmas and biases disappear. The army of the people, yes, this has been eroded. Almost half of the people never enlist in the army, don't enlist in the army at all. And we're losing the glue of the IDF as the one that can create connections in Israeli society. And this is where leadership is needed. But I had a question regarding the recognition by the High Court of Justice of the conversions. For 15 years, this is exactly what the High Court of Justice, it's just like the draft law when the Tal law was canceled and they said, pass a law. And now, and they didn't pass a law, and then everybody criticized the High Court of Justice for deciding. But now that the High Court of Justice has decided in the context of the law of return what it decided, what M.K. Pindrus of United Torah Judaism said, that he called soldiers that convert in the army shiksas, that was very shocking. When we look at the citizens of the state, when we look at the parties that will create unity in Israeli society, and I include the Arabs, and won't be involved in dividing Israeli society, dividing one group against the other. And here we see that the survey reflects reality. What's your opinion of the nation state law? We say very clearly that it needs to be amended. Do you think Arabic should be recognized as an official language? I think that the nation state law expresses a basic right of Israel as the Jewish national home. I support that, of course, but it must include equality as a value. And it seems that there are entire sectors that are not included, that are ignored completely. And you're relating these people as part of your backyard, and that harms your ability to have a proper state. So what's going to happen? So do you think that Arabic should be determined as an official language? 22% of the state are Arabs and their language is legitimate. We talked about Arabic language. Let's talk about Arab society. In the survey regarding the integration of Arabs in Israeli society, only 25% of Israeli Arabs are interested to a large extent of being integrated into Israeli society, 22% to a moderate extent, and 20% to a low extent. What do these numbers say to you? If you connect the numbers, that means that about half of the Arabs in Israel want to be integrated into Israeli society to a large or moderate extent. That takes me very strongly to the subject of the trust of the public in leadership. I think the loss of trust is across the board in the establishment. And I think that this year of the corona, which is the greatest political failure, we see loss of trust among those sectors who entered the corona with a feeling of lack of trust. But even if we look at an institution like the IDF, which had about 90% trust and has gone down to 80%, public trust in institutions as a whole has gone down. And we will be going into the government at a place where we have to strengthen trust and equality in Israeli society, because that's what we believe in. Apropos the integration of Arabs in Israeli society, Yair Lapid told me 2 weeks ago that regarding the subject of having support from the United Arab List for the government, we do not turn to the Arabs only through their political leaders. We turn to them directly and we say to them, they don't have to vote by a sector. Look at the leadership. Look what Yesh Atid has as a platform in terms of advancing and promoting equality. Of course, we're not interested in those who support terror like Yazbak, and you know which organization I'm talking about, and certainly not from the extreme right. That it should not be allowed. We should not allow the extremists to set our agenda. We're talking about decreasing the incitement and that type of discourse. Where is the majority? Are the majority on the extremes, or are they in a place where they want to feel part of society as a whole, where they can both influence and be influenced by the agenda, instead of sticking to the extremes and letting the extremes determine for us, both in Israel and the world? And if I think about The Hague, as someone could say about Israel, that it has committed war crimes, I'm shocked by that statement. Terrible. What do you think should be done in terms of that agreement? I think every effort should be done diplomatically. God forbid that we should accept that kind of statement. We must make every effort to change that decision. I hope that a change of government will lead to that. But just to conclude, I'd like to say that those who allow the extremes to determine our agenda, the extremes on both sides, is wrong and is harming our quality of life as a society. Very, very briefly, it turns out that the other party heads are the ones who are excluding Yair Lapid and saying he can't be a prime minister. What will you do about that? We believe that Yesh Atid will the Yesh Atid can form the best government, and the bigger we are, the more that will be possible. But what is the leading narrative? The narrative that takes the state backwards, or a liberal narrative that reminds us how we got here and what we wanted to do here and have a Jewish and democratic state? And of course, the larger we are, we will be able to dictate the way the next government will look. MK, Orna, Barbivai, Yesh Atid, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the initiative. I think it's very important on the background of the incitement we see on the social media.